Welcome to today's edition of the Rush Limbaugh Show podcast.
Yes, America's anchorman is away. You know how this goes. Before we go any further, before we get into the nightmare we have been plunged into for the last week, I just want to say one thing about Rush. As you know, it's always a great honor for me to be here. I owe Rush an awful lot. I admire Rush, as I've said many times before, for a couple of reasons. One is that he's the best at what he does, no question. He's been at the top of this game for a third of a century. He invented this form. And the other reason is because Rush stood by me a couple of years ago when there were powerful people trying to finish me off in the United States of America and send me scurrying back to Canada, and Rush stood by me, and I will always be grateful for that, because basically he, whatever presence I have in this country, he saved me and he turned it around for me, and I will always owe him for that. But the third reason is the way he's reacted to what he's been going through these last few months. The minute he made this announcement on January, after a while, it became pretty clear that he was having treatment weeks once every 3 weeks. So I've got one of these, whatever it is, a year planner, and I just sort of marked off every third week as the week that Rush was likely to be away, so that I didn't schedule a trip to London or whatever. I'd be available in those weeks. And then things started happening. And I'd hear that there was the presidential debate, the first presidential debate, so Rush wasn't going to have treatment that week. He was going to put it off for a week. And then something else would be happening, and Rush wasn't going to have treatment that week. He was going to put it off for a week. And that's what happened Rush wasn't supposed to be here last week for election week, but he knew people would want him to be here for election week, so he was here for election week. So yet again, we had another postponed treatment week. And that's something that's Rush's gift to you. That's Rush's gift to the republic he loves, because he could have put his health first and his medical regime first, and instead he decided that he was going to put everything into getting Donald J. Trump across the finish line. And at least if you count like Democrats do, we all came up a little short. Not on Tuesday night, but in the small hours of Wednesday morning. But Rush set aside his scheduled cancer treatments to be here to talk about debates, to talk about elections, to be here for you. And I don't know, he was talking a lot about the framers and the founders of this nation yesterday, and I don't know whether it's pledging our lives, fortunes, and sacred honor, but it comes pretty damn close what Rush has been doing since January, where every time he's needed to be here, people have wanted him to be here, he's been here. It takes enormous courage, that. It takes enormous courage, enormous faith, and enormous love, not just for the country, but for the particular audience we have here. And I cannot tell you how much I admire the way Rush has handled this thing, and I just hope to God that he hasn't paid a price for it. But this week is a treatment week, and Todd Herman will be here tomorrow, and we'll see how it goes with Rush after that. But spare a thought for that. Spare a thought for that. I don't know whether... I don't know how many of us would do that in his shoes, but Rush, the first debate, which nobody cares about now. But on that morning afterwards, people wanted to hear what Rush had, and he was there for. Now, I hope that it hasn't cost him in terms of his health care for that, but the time he's taking this couple of days this week, maybe till the end of the week, is fully deserved. Meanwhile, people who aren't pledging lives, fortunes, and sacred honor, Dan Quayle has told Donald Trump, he's told the New York Times that Donald Trump should just give it up. It's over. Give it up. He's put an E on the end of up, so you know it's the authentic Dan Quayle. It's the E for the big elbow. Donald Trump right now is living in a conspiracy thriller. I might as well tell you my view on this, if you want the shortcut, is I believe what happened in the early hours of Wednesday and the days that followed is that 71 million Americans became the victims of the greatest heist, the greatest electoral heist in the Democratic era. However you want to count that, going back till the fall of the great European empires at the end of the Great War. But however long it is, this is the greatest electoral heist in the Democratic era. Trump is living in a conspiracy theory, in a conspiracy thriller, actually, and not an interesting one, like those interesting conspiracy thrillers where the guy is trying to keep one step ahead of the CIA and the other deep state guys who are out to get him. And he's taken off and he's in a car and he comes to a town in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of a Kansas cornfield with one stoplight. And he goes into the general store and he breaks $1 to get some change to use the single payphones. The single payphone at that one stoplight town, and he's in the payphone and he puts the quarter in and he dials the number in Washington, D.C. to get to his friend to alert him to what's going on, and boom! The deep state got to him first and the payphone is blown sky high. Donald Trump isn't in an entertaining conspiracy thriller, but he is in one that is just as effective and just as suffocating, where he can't trust 9 out of 10 people around him. There is a story in the New York Times, as astonishing as anything I've ever seen in my time in the United States. There isn't much good to be said for the system right now, but Trump is doing his best to push back. And what is he pushing back against? He's pushing back on every level against this heist that took place in the early hours of Wednesday morning. And so I wake up and I see in the New York Times, they're good, they're very good, they're evil, but they're good, growing discomfort at law firms representing Trump in election lawsuits. There's three journalists' names on this story. And they're talking about Jones Day, which is one of the most powerful law firms in Washington. And Trump has retained them to wage his legal battle about the shenanigans, to put it mildly, in this election, about the fraud in this election. He's retained Jones Day, one of the most powerful law firms in Washington. And I wake up this morning and I see in the New York Times growing discomfort at law firms representing Trump in election lawsuits. So the lawyers he's hired are leaking to the New York Times about how unhappy they are with taking his case and about his case. For example, they're represented, these lawyers who've talked to these law firms who've talked to the New York Times, are behind this case in Pennsylvania and elsewhere. And they're now leaking to the New York Times their unhappiness with having to represent Trump and with the weakness of his case. In other words, for Trump, there's no attorney-client privilege, which means if you support Trump in this battle, there's no attorney-client privilege for you. Right now, the Trump campaign is asking Republican voters to give money to the Trump campaign so that they can pay for a legal battle to reverse the fraud that took place in the early hours of Wednesday morning. And what's happening is that you're saying, oh, yes, I'd like to get behind Trump on that. I support Trump. I want to win this legal battle. So you send $100 to the Trump campaign. The Trump campaign gives $100 to these bums at Jones Day law firm in Washington, D.C. And then the bums at the Jones Day law firm leak it to the New York Times about how this case is a bust, it's a loser, it's going nowhere. He doesn't have attorney-client privilege. If this were one of the functioning parts of the legal world, which is, by comparison, almost anywhere except here and maybe some of the ropier one-party banana republics. But if he was almost anywhere else certainly in the functioning parts of the common law world, if he were in Scotland, if he were in Australia, if he were in Singapore, these bums at Jones Day would be disbarred for what they've just done. I have a little bit of a history with these guys where we're in a case together, not terribly happily. But for instance, their big guy, Michael Carvin, was the guy who did the Obamacare appeal to the Supreme Court and blew it, lost it. The usual overrated, overpaid American quote-unquote super lawyer. In the case I'm mixed up in, he had to do a brief to the Supreme Court and managed to attribute to me words uttered by somebody else. So there's also this, not only the expensive super lawyer, but the expensive but lazy super lawyer who can't even get basic things right. But the president has to get serious here. The president is the loneliest man in town right now. 9 out of 10 people, he's holed up in the White House, and 9 out of 10 people around him are trying to screw him over. They're already they're already loading up their parachutes. They're already planning the next gig, the book deal, the CNN contract, and they're ready to just screw him over. And the first thing he has to do is get serious. If he's going to wage this legal battle, he's got to have lawyers who are on his side, who aren't taking time off from working the case to let the New York Times know they don't believe in the case and they don't believe in Trump and they don't really want him as a client. They've leaked the fact, for example, that he owes them money, which is not something lawyers are meant to do. As I said, if we were before the Law Society of Alberta or one of the Inns of Court in London, these guys would be in serious charge of being disbarred. So Jones Day ought to be off the case today. We're up against the clock here. We're up against the clock legally. You know, they've gone and they've bought Joe Biden all this Office of the President-elect crests and seals that they've had run off at Staples for $17 and change, and they don't want to waste those things. So every time Joe Biden appears on TV, he looks more and more official. And the president is stuck with some of the world's most expensive lawyers, and they're leaking to the New York Times. He can't trust anybody. So I hope he gets serious, and actually by the time I say this, those bums are off the case. This is disgusting here. We are living in a blizzard of lies, in which, as I said, the president is a lonelier and lonelier man, surrounded by the extras of a cheap conspiracy thriller. He thinks he's talking to his lawyer, and instead he's talking to a mole for the New York Times, leaking to the opposition. You know what I've said before about my own case is that I generally despise the American bar. America has as many lawyers as the rest of the planet put together, which means it has at least as many bad lawyers as the rest of the planet put together, which means it has far more overpaid bad lawyers than the rest of the planet put together. And while there are many admirable people out there, such as Sidney Powell, who's someone who should be in charge of this case rather than these bums, but there are a lot of bad guys out there. And the president is actually right now using the donations of his supporters to enrich these creeps like Carvin and the rest of the guys at Jones Day, who are already leaking about what a crummy, useless, pointless case it is, and they wish he'd just pay him the money and clear off. They're already leaking about it to the New York Times. This country is actually fracturing into two alternative realities. And right now, a big bunch of the people who believe in the alternative reality are surrounding the president and entrapping him ever deeper. Something has to be done about this. 800-282-2882, Mark Stein for Rush. Your calls and lots more in the 3 hours ahead. Mark Stein in for Rush on America's #1 radio show. Thrilled and honoured to be here. 800-282-2882. You have the benefits of Keith. Keith will be call screening today, and Mike is down in New York ensuring that all the technical things go smoothly. A lot of strange things going on. I noticed just yesterday, listening to Talk Radio, Rush was complaining about some issues with the phones. And then I was listening to some other guy a couple of hours later, and he was having issues with the phones. There's a lot of coincidences going on at the moment as the new regime cements its grip. We have breaking news. Oh, God, I don't know how anybody can take this stuff seriously. Alaska, right? Alaska, Alaska's apparently a swing state now, has 3 electoral college votes. It seemed pretty clear which way they were going a week ago, but then it all ground to a halt, and the good news is that Alaska has now said it will start counting its outstanding 155,000 absentee and other ballots today, so maybe it will finally get... How can you take this seriously, America? How can you take this seriously? A few weeks ago when I was here, I happened to be here a couple of days after New Brunswick held an election, and that's a province in Canada, so nobody's interested in it. But it happens to have been the first jurisdiction to hold an election since the COVID broke, so everyone's a bit worried, and they'd slightly extended the opportunities. Normally in New Brunswick, mail-in ballots, postal ballots are a little bit restricted, but there they'd said because of the COVID, if you're not comfortable going and voting in person, you can come and claim a mail-in ballot. So there was a little bit more of a mail-in vote than usual. Nevertheless, the polls closed at 8 p.m. Atlantic time in New Brunswick, and they announced the result at 8:55 p.m. That's the way functioning jurisdictions work. Now we have Alaska. It's been a week, and they're now saying, okay, we're ready to resume the count. This is not a normal, even in the not obviously corrupt parts of the electoral system. This has been a dirty election, and even if you don't think it's dirty, it's been a totally incompetent election that should shame the United States. I love listening to these guys like these lefties, like Bernie Sanders, who say, oh, no. When we say socialism, we're not thinking of Venezuela. Perish the thought. Put that out of your head. We have in mind Denmark and Sweden and Norway, that kind of socialism. Well, I can tell you, you couldn't have run this kind of lousy election, self-evidently incompetent and or corrupt election in Sweden, Denmark, or Norway. Nowhere in the Western world runs these kinds of corrupt elections, incompetent elections, other than the United States. Rush was quite right yesterday when he was trying to distinguish between anecdotage and a legal argument. They're not the same thing, as we'll explore in the course of the show. But the anecdotage is piling up, and the point is 70% of Republicans don't think the election was free and fair. That's according to a poll in Politico. 70% of Republicans. I don't know whether that's Republican voters. There were, 71 million Republican voters. So 70% is basically 50 million people reject this election. Yeah, you know the way this works. Rush said it was a treatment week, which means he's under the care of doctors and nurses all day today, and if he's fighting fit, he tries to make it back Thursday, if not Friday. But you never know. He warned that it might take a little longer this time. I'm here today. The great Todd Herman comes in to take care of you tomorrow. We're talking about the quote-unquote election. Rush was talking, yes. Rush was very calm yesterday, and he was playing some of these very calm sound bites of Ken Starr. who always sounds calm and who always sounds reasonable, and yet they managed, as you recall, during the Clinton impeachment, to demonize him and turn him into some crazy, foaming, fire-breathing fundamentalist who never stopped singing hymns unless it was to depose Monica about how the president never reached quote-unquote completion. That's what they did to Ken Starr, who's the nicest, sweetest, cuddliest person. When he was a judge, you'd never come up before a sweeter, cuddlier judge. And Rush was playing all these very calm sound bites from him, talking about how what was happening was a constitutional travesty. And Rush was saying that the president needs, in effect, an election fraud czar, some guy who's in charge of the thing. To tie it all together, it's bewildering to me how this wasn't in place before the election, but he needs someone who can just speak in legal terms. People forget, because in a sense they buy into the leftist narrative that the Supreme Court basically handed the election to Bush. They didn't. Judges, the further up you go, from the trial court to this appellate court, that appellate court, until you wind up at the Supreme Court, the arguments get narrower and narrower and narrower, and they like to decide. All judges are a bit like that. The thing they say about judges, what does a judge do? Lawyers tell you things like this all the time. A judge sits. He's the sitting judge. That's what a judge does. He sits. And to get him to shift his bottom in one way or another is actually quite an achievement. And so the sitting judge doesn't want to shift way over this side or way over that side. He wants to decide very narrowly on a narrow point. So if you have a lawyer, you can get a lot of, there's you know the kind, they often turn up on legal shows here, in which people just want to throw a whole bunch of spaghetti at the wall and hope that a couple of strands stick. And the higher you go, the less judges are interested in that. And by the time you get to the Supreme Court, no judges are really interested in that. They want a narrow legal argument. In 2000, for example, the Supreme Court then decided, voters 7-2, I think it was, that the use of different standards of counting in different counties violated the Equal Protection Clause. So that's a very narrow legal argument. They don't have to get into which system is the best or which system is unconstitutional or all that. They just decided you've got all these different systems, and that breaks the Equal Protection Clause, so we got to stop it. You got to cut it out. We can't have that. That's all they did. And if they make any kind of consequential decision this time round, they're going to do it on something that narrow, a legal argument. So you need a Trump lawyer who is coming up with that kind of simple legal argument. I don't think it's difficult. For example, the Democrats. Let's take their glorious president, Jimmy Carter. Great Democrat president, a Democrat legend, a Democrat colossus, Mr. Malaise, a legend. Jimmy Carter has spent the years since he was defeated in 1980 in going around the world certifying elections to see if they're free and fair. He goes to places like Ivory Coast, Côte d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast, and sees whether their election is free and fair. What's the objective word there? Sees, right? You have to be able to see not just the election, but the count. You have to be an election, quote, observer. And what is it you're observing? If you work for the UN, and you're one of these UN election observers, they fly into Rwanda or Chad or wherever it is. They fly in an election observer to observe. And so in Pennsylvania, if you're not allowed to observe, it's not a free and fair election. The UN election observers wouldn't say it. Jimmy Carter wouldn't say it. The Trump campaign would be within their rights to call Jimmy Carter as an expert witness to testify that under Pennsylvania's rules, this would not pass as a free and fair election with the UN or with the Carter Center. It doesn't meet those rules. In other words, Pennsylvania is worse than Ivory Coast. It's an insult to the residents of Ivory Coast to compare them to the citizens of Pennsylvania, because Pennsylvania, by not letting in the other side, is actually engaging in behavior that would not pass muster if this was a third world banana republic in which UN election observers and Jimmy Carter had to certify the election. I apologize to any listeners from third world banana republics for comparing you with Pennsylvania. I know it's terribly rude. I'm sorry. I'm just making a rhetorical point here. If you're from Ivory Coast, if you're from Chad, if you're from Niger, if you're from any of those places, I do apologize for comparing you with Pennsylvania. What are we meant to do about this? What are the 70% of Republicans who don't think the election was free and fair meant to do about this? Yesterday, Rush spoke to a caller from Michigan, Sherman.
Sherman is in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Sherman, thanks for calling. How you doing, buddy?
Yes, sir. Doing great.
Thank you.
And I'm glad you're with us today, and I really appreciate you taking the time to come in when you could have gone for treatment week. I really think you need to hear this, and I think the president needs to hear this. Everybody is taking the wrong message from this election, and they're missing the message, and they're angry and demoralized, but they need to stop being angry about it. I'm 48, and I actually feel better about the future of the country than I have in a very long time. This was not a blue wave or a wipeout or a repudiation of the president. The Republicans kept the Senate. Mitch McConnell, Lindsey Graham, Susan Collins won re-election.
Hang on just a sec. Now, I don't want to throw cold water on anything, and I agree pretty much what you're saying. It was not a blue wave. The country's not gone socialist. The country did not embrace Joe Biden. That's not at all what happened here. That's your point, right?
Yes, sir.
But we still had an election stolen. We still had. Now, I agree with your point, too, that anger, you're going to have some of that, but it should not be the guiding emotion. But on the Senate races, they're still trying to steal those, Sherman. In Georgia, one of the reasons why they have been holding off on giving that state to Trump and why they've been looking more votes is to force runoffs in both of those Georgia Senate races, which they've now done. If they take those two, they run the Senate because that gives them Kamala Harris as the 51st vote as vice president. And that means the blue wave does become the guiding principles of this country.
Yeah, Rush is onto something there. I can't get over this. And it's true, if you watch, I switched on Fox News a couple of mornings after the election, and they're running all these heartwarming, soft-focused stories about, oh, look, there was this guy down in Texas, down by the Rio Grande, and it's usually a solidly Democrat district, but this guy managed to get elected dog catcher in who's ever heard of it county down in the middle of nowhere, and that county has never had a Republican dog catcher before. And will you knock it off? The Democrats set out to steal the only thing they cared about, which was to take Trump out, and they succeeded. And Sherman should know this because he's from Michigan. He's from Michigan, where last time I saw, Michigan is incredible. You know, Michigan, you know, when you look at life expectancy around the world, and there's people who say, well, American life expectancy, it's lower than Canada. And then when you look at Japan's life expectancy is just spectacular. Right now, Sherman is living in with the jurisdiction with the highest life expectancy on the planet. Something like 1,500 well, not just centenarians, but super centenarians. There are people 118, 120 years old. There are people born in the 19th century who voted in your state, Sherman. I mean, this is incredible. Michigan has left Japan in the dust. It's left Canada in the dust. Michigan, at least every 4th November, has the highest life expectancy in the planet. They have found the secret of eternal life. All you got to do is keep voting Democrat. June Aiken, who, I don't know whether Ann Arbor is anywhere near Jackson, Michigan. I think they've got Detroit in the middle or something, if my memory of Michigan geography is correct. But at Field's department store, older listeners from Jackson, Michigan may well remember a lovely lady called June Aiken, who worked in the beauty salon in Field's department store in Jackson, Michigan. And June was a lovely lady, lived nearby in Napoleon Township, and died sadly last year, but took the precaution of demanding an absentee ballot so that she could nevertheless vote in this election. She is absentee in a very real sense, and yet she managed to vote in Sherman's own county. And Lindsey Graham is quite right about this. Republicans, this system, this corrupt mail-in system, which has no scrutiny, so you can have mail-in ballots without proof of identity, proof of residence, proof of anything. You can send in mail-in ballots delivered in a Biden-Harris campaign van in the early hours of Wednesday morning and win the election. Do you think COVID is ever going away? COVID will be kept going no matter how many vaccines they come up with, just because it is the best and easiest way to keep mail-in voting going, and thereby enabling the Democrats to steal the national election. Lindsey Graham is quite right. No Republican will ever be elected president if this level of election fraud is maintained. So stop looking for the silver lining, Sherman. There's no point worrying about the fabulous guy in Ann Arbor, the great Republican candidate who got elected dog catcher. For national office, the Republicans are dead if this heist is not reversed. Mark Stein for Rush. We'll take your calls straight ahead. Mark Stein in for Rush on the EIB network. Let us go to James in Auburndale, Florida. James, you're first up on America's #1 radio show. Great to have you with us.
Yeah, honored to talk with you, Mr. Stein. In America, we have in-person voting and absentee voting, which is really the official mail-in ballot system. But my question to you is this. Do you know who the person is who authorized these fraudulent mail-in ballots to be distributed? Could that person be prosecuted for mail fraud to trying to steal our election?
Well, the question is, what do you want to do? Do you want to keep Trump in office? Because you can prosecute people, but criminal prosecutions do not. I mean, they proceed. They used to proceed quickly. Back when McKinley was shot and assassinated, the guy was whatever he was called, Chogosh, was electrocuted 6 weeks later because the criminal justice system functioned then. No one is going to be criminally convicted before the Electoral College meets in December. The point about mail-in ballots, though, is they're inherently insecure, which is why, again, to go back to what Bernie Sanders was, we just want to be more like Scandinavia. Well, in the European Union, 2/3 of the European Union ban all these kind of postal ballots, as they say, unless you're out of the country, and you have a good reason to be out of the country. France got rid of them in 1975 because of all the ballot fraud in Corsica. Corsicans are hard men. I mean, not obviously by the standards of Democrat operatives, but they're hard men by the standards of Mediterranean Europe. And it's not a respectable electoral system. And that's why the COVID was kept going. That's why the COVID crisis was kept going, in order to enable the Democrats to adopt an electoral system they could game. These things about as long as it's postmarked by Election Day. Has anyone actually been to a post office in the last 20 years and seen them postmarking things? Most of these machines, these franking machines and everything, don't bother with a postmark. I did my town's Old Home Day celebration a few years ago in New Hampshire, And I had to the postmistress introduced a special stamp for Old Home Day in my little town in New Hampshire, and I had to ask her to reintroduce the hand stamp so that everybody could actually get a postmark. Because normally, if you look at most of the mail you get these days, it doesn't have a postmark on. We're having mail-in ballots that don't go anywhere near the mail. We're having mail-in ballots that, as in Nevada, were delivered in Biden-Harris trucks. Unless the USPS has subcontracted to Biden-Harris, the Biden-Harris campaign, that never went anywhere near the mail system, James. So that's an inherently corrupt system.
Thank you very much for taking my call.
My pleasure, James. I'll come back to that point about criminal conviction, because we're at the stage now is what meaningful relief can you ask a court for? That's why you go to court. You don't go to court to win a theoretical victory. You go to court to win meaningful relief that will save the day. And we'll talk about that straight ahead on the Rush Limbaugh Show. Mark Stein in for Rush on America's #1 radio show. As I said, the good news is they're about to resume recounting those 155,000 ballots in Alaska. That's great news, isn't it? Why do they stop counting? As you know, everything was fine and dandy until whatever it was, 10:47 on election night, when mysteriously, all the big Democrat cities in a half dozen swing states all decided it was time to go home for the night. The parties spent $14 billion on this election. That would be considered a huge amount of money in any other functioning society. And yet, tragically, that $14 billion did not provide for any poll workers to do the night shift in Philadelphia, in Detroit, in Milwaukee. Something has to be done about this, or there is no point actually participating in these kinds of elections. Yes, America's anchorman is away, and this is your undocumented anchorman, Mark Stein, thrilled and honoured to be here, even on very dark days for the Republic. As you know, we come from Ice Station EIB in the chilly wastes of far northern New England, just a stone's throw from the Quebec border. For those of you who enjoy throwing stones at the Quebec border, there's no point doing it now. It's closed. So I can't even do my 15-year joke on this show. That if you're fleeing the country, do swing by and say hello. You can't miss us because we got a big sign on the highway saying last Rush guest host before the border. I can't do that because the border's closed. So all those, I don't even know what all those liberal celebrities threatening to flee the country. You can't even get into Canada. The border's closed. The maple curtain has descended across the 49th parallel and killed my joke. My other joke, which the COVID has killed, because for some reason, I always used to like to do this joke every couple of years, because for some reason, there was a time when the release of the new James Bond film used to coincide with the American election. And for years and years and years, going back to Clinton, Bob Dole, I always used to do a thing about, oh yeah, have you seen the new Bond film? Oh yeah. It's got this absolutely terrifying scene where a shark is thrown into a tank of Democratic Party operatives. And I did that joke reliably, and I can't do it now because they postponed the new 007 film till next spring because of the COVID. So I can't do that joke. They've killed I've only got 7 jokes, and the grim state of the world we live in has killed 2 of them. I mentioned just before, when we were talking just before the top of the hour, that the question is, what relief do you seek from the court? So, for example, I'm not interested, couldn't be less interested in Bob Barr opening up Bill Barr? Is it Bill Barr? Bob Barr? I can't remember now. They're resigning. There have been so many. Well, it's Bill Barr at the Department of Justice opening up a possible criminal investigation into the shenanigans. I don't even like that word shenanigans, because it implies that what's going on is less evil than it is. It's just something lovable rogues get up to. As Rush was talking about Monday, he made the very good point. Was it Monday or was it the day before? Couple of days earlier. But he made the very good point that for over a century now, we have looked at systemic fraud in key places in the United States, in famous cities, and we've made jokes about it, or the running jokes about everybody getting up out of the Cook County graveyards and going to vote in Chicago. We've turned it into a joke. It isn't a joke, it's evil. I don't know why we turned it into a joke. And, you know, we have to sit through, like, rubbish like Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, Jimmy Stewart, all very earnest and straight shooting and all the rest of it. For every Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, there are a zillion films and plays and novels in which people who steal elections are presented as lovable rogues. But the thing about it is, a criminal investigation isn't going to be wrapped up before the Electoral College meets in December. They're going to be starting to certify. Right now, only networks have called the election. The only reason he can stand there, Joe Biden, in front of that office of the president-elect thing. And by the way, for all you constitutional scholars out there, what clause in the United States Constitution provides for the office of the president-elect? God bless that lady at the General Services Administration who's declining to get with the program and saying, no, you're not the president-elect yet. We're not going to make all this stuff available to you. But he's standing there in front of the office of the president-elect sign he had run off at Staples for $23.74. The states are going to actually be confirming electoral results soon, certifying them, as they say, and then the Electoral College meets in December. And so getting excited about criminal prosecutions is stupid for two reasons. A, no Democrat ever goes to jail, and B, it's not going to be wrapped up before the Electoral College meets, so it's a complete waste of time. I don't even know how often do you have to get played by these guys. This morning, right now, in fact, Andrew McCabe, remember Andrew McCabe, the Operation Crossfire Hurricane guy? He's testifying yet again before the Senate, and he's getting tough questions from Lindsey Graham. So while we're still trying to lay a glove on the fraudsters of 2016, the Democrats have gone ahead and stolen 2020. That's how big a weight. So I tell you, I'm making certain, if this is the dawn of the Biden era, so-called, I'm making certain new era resolutions to myself that I'm not going to waste time with stupid investigations. No Democrats go to jail. That's the beginning and end of the story. So if you want to waste your time on those investigations, you'll have to go ahead and do it without my interest. We should know by now. So we're talking to Andrew McCabe about what he was up to in the summer of 2016 while the Democrats have just stolen 2020. I mean, God, get a clue, losers. There's no point to any of that. Then we have the present situation. And if it goes to criminal investigations and all the rest of it, none of it's going to work. A scandal is only a scandal if it's public. A private scandal that you and three other people know about isn't really a scandal. And Hunter Biden, for example, was only a scandal on Fox News and talk radio. Increasingly, the stolen election isn't a scandal on Fox News. It's just here. On Rush and a few other shows that they talk about it.
Voters than citizens, or more voters than registered voters, as happens in mail-in states, because I come from one. This isn't news to us. They found it when Dino Rossi, Republican, great Republican, my friend Chris Wider just interviewed him, and I'll talk about this later in more detail. He won 2 recounts. He lost the third. 9 times they found new ballots. And it wasn't until later that they figured out, Dino lost by about 300 votes or something, but there were 2,000 felons and people who weren't legally allowed to vote who voted in this. It was legitimately a stolen election. It is what our job is now is to make sure that the effort is funded, the president's effort is funded. And one other thing, Justin, and I want to thank you for the call because I want to say one other thing. Justin from Columbia, South Carolina, I want to say one other thing that is not necessarily to the EIB audience, but I want you to pass the message on. Hey, if you're a poll worker on the Democrat side, or you're a vote counter, or you're USPS, and if you got conned in to doing something wrong in this election, it could be a felony. Hey, the people at the top have got free attorneys. They got attorneys general to defend them. They'll have no problem bringing a Perkins Coie type firm to defend them. Do you have that? If you were involved in any fraud, if you got conned into it, or your job depends on it, or do it for the team, they will toss you under a series of 16 buses and drink wine and champagne as they roll over you. You better get in front of this if you were involved. Man, there's so much more to get to on the EIB Network. It's Todd Herman filling in for Rush Limbaugh.
You're listening to the EIB Network.
A national standard for the determination of who's the president. They say Congress shall determine the time of choosing the electors and the day on which they shall give their vote, which day shall be the same throughout the United States. So in other words, they didn't foresee a system, the system we have now, in which you have an elastic standard for voting, time for voting eligibility, and all the rest of it. And you'd have to find five judges on this so-called 6-3 conservative bench willing to do that, which is going to be tough to do the longer this goes on. And you're going to need a really solid lawyer to make it, which probably doesn't mean lawyers who are leaking as these Jones Day bums are. You know, think about it, right? Think about it. The Trump campaign is asking people to pay for this legal battle by sending money. And the lawyers that you are sending money to are leaking about how they don't like the president and they don't like his case to the New York Times. This is disgusting. I'll say one more thing, too. The other great, all systems, the more a system moves away from paper ballots, the less secure it is. When I first came to this country, I marveled. I was awed by New England town meeting, just like Tocqueville was 2 centuries ago. I went to town meeting. I was amazed at how there were all these elected offices, and all the voting for the elected offices was really extremely clean, with clean paper ballots, and town meeting votes where, unless it was clear from the eyes that the vote was overwhelming, they'd go to a voice vote, they go to a paper vote, and all of it. And I thought these are the cleanest elections in the world. Because I was looking at a New Hampshire town meeting, which are the cleanest elections in the world, and as Tocqueville said, is the best system in the world. And then, right out of nowhere, I guess it probably was Bush versus Gore. I don't think I knew the word Chad. Well, I knew the word Chad. I think there was a vocal group from the 1950s called the Four Chads. But other than that, I didn't know the word Chad. I didn't know the word Chad as an electoral process. I didn't know that you could actually make a living as a Chad diviner. This is like one of these medicine men in the what we used to call the more primitive parts of the world. A Chad diviner could hold up a Chad and look at a dimple Chad or a hanging Chad and discern from the dimple on the Chad whether that person had really intended to vote for Bush or Gore. Although in principle, most Chad diviners tend to find that every Chad is a vote for Gore. I had no idea. This is complete. The more you have these non-paper ballot systems, the more corrupt it is. Now, I heard, for example, about this system in Michigan. And I thought, this is disgusting. This is where Sherman lives. Sherman lives in Michigan and thinks it's hunky-dory.
President
Should all be celebrating the lack of a big blue wave. Where this electoral machine had accidentally transferred 6,000 Trump votes to Biden. But fortunately, whichever county clerk was looking at it had...
but I will tell you something. I have watched it in my state. I just mentioned this gubernatorial candidate in 2004, Dino Rossi. He's a friend of mine. I watched it happen. I've seen the downfall of my state. I see a 6-block region of the crown city of Washington taken over by domestic terrorists. Two black young people murdered. One was a child. The other was a teen. In a city where the mayor called it the summer of love. Sex trafficking is up 2,000% under hapless, grifting Jay Inslee. So, Fed Up Right Check, we could have a contest about anger. I'm focused on moving us to an arrival point for justice. Because trust me, watching my friend win one recount, then another recount, and then, as reported in the media, one of the ballot counters said upon the third count, "Oh, I forgot. I've got just enough ballots in the trunk of my car." And if that sounds familiar, Breitbart News notes that a year later, in 2005, labor councilors Shafaq Ahmed, Shah Jaran, Isaac Khan, and Muhammad Islam and another person were found guilty of electoral fraud after it was established that they had hidden some ballots in the boots, the trunks of their car. My anger is also disappointment that those of us who've been through this haven't been eloquent enough at warning everybody this is coming. I'm a father. I don't want my daughter to grow up in a crumbling republic, but this is how it happens. So I could get plenty angry, but I'm also hosting a radio show. And we also need to persuade and chat with Rush's listeners. Let's talk to David in Dundee, Oregon. David, you're on the Rush Limbaugh program. It's Todd Herman filling in. Hi, David.
Hi, Todd. Thanks for taking my call, and thanks for filling in for the great Maha Rushy. I pray for him regularly, along with my grandson who's going through the same thing.
Oh, wait. What's your grandson? Oh, no. What's your grandson's name?
Cameron.
Say it again, please.
Cameron.
Hey, buddy. Mm-hmm. Hey, Cameron. It's about 80 million people. Yep. So, David, I just want to say one thing. We'll get to your point. Cameron, it's about 80 million people praying for you right now, bud. You go whoop cancer. You go whoop it. God's standing by your side. David, I'm not trying to make you cry, brother, but I'm a father too. So sorry. Go on with your point. You didn't call Rush's show just for prayers.
No. So you were talking about pattern recognition, and you had a caller earlier talking about contaminated ballots and stuff, This all is going to go to the courts, but, I really believe in the end the Supreme Court doesn't want to call an election. The real petition that needs to be made to the court in the end is, even if there's not conclusive evidence to flip the election, there should be surely a preponderance of evidence making the thing questionable and therefore should not be certifiable. So that the attorneys, everyone should be petitioning the Supreme Court to determine this election is non-certifiable, and then it would get kicked back to Congress.
And then what happens?
Well, at this point, a lot of the people are saying they believe, since that election is done by state, not by the quantity of congressional members voting, that it would actually end up Trump winning.
Any way we get to justice, here's what I want, David. Look, the patterns are clear to me. there was fraud. The pattern was clear to me. There was collusion. The pattern is clear to me that CNN is colluding with Joe Biden. After Joe Biden gave his fake victory speech, after his being fake anointed, president-elect, CNN had a commercial ready to roll that came off the same fake theme of a guy who has drugged this country as irrevocably racist, as irrevocably backward, as in need of being torn asunder. As he winked and nodded at Black Lives Matter Incorporated, who are taking black lives, who are harming black people. This man says it's time to come together, and CNN has a commercial ready to roll. The same CNN saying, now we can finally have normalized relations. You know exactly what this sounds like. It sounds like an abusive relationship. Hey, honey, now that you know you're not allowed to wear that skirt, we can have all sorts of normalized relationships. Or, husband, now that you know you don't get to purchase, a $50 lunch, now we can have normalized relations. That's what it sounds like. But I appreciate your analysis, and I mean it when I'm praying for Cameron. Well, we got 30 seconds.
Yeah,
what else do you want to say?
I agree with you. Yeah, I agree with you completely on everything you said. But, so often when things come down in the court, if there's not solid, irrefutable evidence, then they're not going to charge. But, in the case of a preponderance of evidence, especially with voting, I believe there's good cause to call this thing uncertifiable if they're not going to go back and recount everything or redo the election.
I have this other question, David, is if we show that the Democrats only got, let's say, 99% of the way to overturning the election, if they didn't get the last 1%, if we can't prove the last 1%, we let the others go. No, the people who blocked the GOP poll observers must go to jail. The people who put boards up in the windows in Detroit must go to jail. Anybody who told someone to backdate a ballot illegally must go to jail, or they'll do it again. David, appreciate the call. Prayers out to Cameron. Thank you for telling to us about that. It's Todd Herman in for Rush Limbaugh on the EIB Network.
I cannot tell you how much I respect the way Rush has handled, this lousy stinker of a year, just for him personally with the medical stuff, and the way he's put back his treatment weeks because of the first debate or because it was election night or whatever. Now he's taken a couple of days off for his delayed treatment, and he'll come back when he comes back, and he has earned this time. No one has worked harder than Rush to help get this thing over the finish line. And as I said, the difference for Republicans is you always have to win beyond the margin of law. You always have to win by 4-5 points on election night, because otherwise these bums start stealing the minute the hours of darkness descend. And there's nothing new about it. There's nothing new about it. 100 years ago, in the Warren Harding GOP landslide of 1920, spectacular coast-to-coast Republican landslide, the Democrats were stealing and interfering with elections. And the only difference is who they're stealing them from and who they're giving them to. So, for example, in Atlanta 100 years ago, the Democrat Party, at that point it was black women trying to vote. And in Atlanta, at one polling precinct, 75 black women went to vote. And as soon as they'd left, the Democrat frauds running the one-party state of that polling precinct simply cancelled those votes. This is a party... I mean, really, this is their best argument the Democrats have when they go into court. We've been stealing elections now basically since the end of the Civil War, so it's like settled law. That's the legal precedent. We've been doing it for 150 years, so it's settled law. The legal argument that has to be made is narrow because they're judges, so they're not going to go for any big transformative thing where you just throw a ton of stuff, throw a ton of spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. It's going to have to be a narrow, equal protection type argument, saying that, simply put, if you look at the Democrat cities in swing states that decided the election, that in itself is an interesting thing. There are not really that many blue states, and the states that are swing states are basically red states, geographically speaking, with a couple of blue cities in them. And the blue cities are among the most corrupt and loathsome and repellent jurisdictions in the so-called free world. Just utterly disgusting. Doing things that the United States State Department, for example, would not certify that election under its own rules for approving elections, because under Democrat rules for under the State Department's rules for approving elections, you have to maintain certain conditions, including things like ballot access. If you don't let people watch the vote, it's not a fair vote. But again, these guys are betting that they are not going to be called on that, because if Andrew McCabe is still a free man after 4 years, nothing's going to happen. Nothing's going to happen to them. So now you have to go and you have to look at these judges. You can count Roberts out. So putting Roberts in, you're looking at 5 out of 9 judges who are going to support a narrow argument based on equal protection before the law. That's what you got to do. Now, Rush was talking, this was interesting to me, Rush was talking yesterday about the mysteriously changed media environment since a week ago. Here's Rush.
I've had so many emails from you about Fox News. I've had so many emails from those of you who are livid and angry, starting with the Arizona call, starting and then continuing with other things. And excuse me, I think that there's a simple explanation here. There's a key rule I've always believed in media, which is what I'm in. I'm in talk radio. And it actually goes back to the William Holden quote here in that movie, the Wild Bunch. You do not turn on your base. You do not turn on your audience unless you've had some kind of you just don't you don't do it for the sake of the approval of your enemies. You don't turn on the people who got you where you are because you would rather be friends with other people. You just don't do it, and that appears to be what's happened here. We've got Donna Brazil all over the place. We've got, everybody on a talking head interview, half of them or more are New York Times or Washington Post Democrat media people. The Arizona call, some even with the Chris Wallace debate think is an anti-Trump move. But throughout all of this, the media can't turn talk radio, can they? The media has been desperate to blow up talk radio and Fox News. They've wanted to draw up Fox News ever since Fox News was founded and created. And they've wanted to blow talk radio up since before that. They've wanted to destroy me and my character and that of anybody else who hosts a talk radio program. Why is it, do you think? It looks like they may be having some success now in blowing up Fox. Let me tell you something, folks. If the people running Fox succeed in destroying the distinction that Fox has from the rest of the media, they're going to destroy Fox. If they are successful in taking away from Fox the things that distinguish it and make it appear different from the rest of the drive-by media, what do you think is going to happen? The reason they have not been able to do this with talk radio is we do not stab our audience in the back. We do not turn on our base. We remain principled and consistent. From me on down to everybody who does this on the conservative side, we are not apologetic. We do not seek the approval of people that don't like us. It's very strange how no one has figured out why it is talk radio that remains powerful, popular, unassailable. It's not difficult at all if you know where to look.
Amen to that. One of the things I love about this show is that there's no shadowy billionaires behind the Excellence in Broadcasting Network. There's Rush and there's loyal lieutenants with the occasional loyal foreign lieutenant who have been on this thing for years. And so you don't have to worry about, all the stuff you have to worry about, murky corporate decisions. But I'll just add a footnote to the way people were emailing Rush about what's happening at Fox, which is striking. Let's put it that way. Fox on Friday had one of the worst nights, one of the worst days it's had in years. Fox came third. Fox usually, especially in prime time, beats the CNN and MSNBC combined. So if you add up their total audience, it doesn't equal Fox's. And it's been like that for years. On Friday, Fox came third. CNN was number one, MSNBC was number two, and Fox was number three, with the exception of my friend Tucker, who came number two in his time slot below CNN. That is absolutely incredible. It is almost as if between waking up on Wednesday morning and Friday, close to a third of Fox viewers decided, I don't think so. And in fact, the primetime shows like Tucker and Sean Hannity were 2 million down on what their audience had been on Monday night. So in other words, the reaction has been instant. And I saw something very odd today when I switched on the television, just had a look at it before I came in to do this show. Fox on its daytime shows, on its daytime news shows like America's Newsroom, is now running constant promos for its primetime lineup, for Tucker, for Hannity, for Laura Ingraham. As if they're saying, no, we're still the Fox you've known and loved. Please come back to us. We don't want another night. We don't want another day, another night where we come third. We come third in the ratings below CNN and MSNBC. Fox, whatever Fox was trying to accomplish by the last week, they got the message that when millions of people just decide, I'm done, see ya, they're now desperate to actually correct that. And that's very important. That's you. That's not on some influential pundit. That's not on some commentator. That's not on some shadowy billionaire. That's millions and millions of people. 2 million at least just saying, I don't know whether I need to sit through this. And that's a lesson to you at a time when a few thousand votes have been stolen here, and a few thousand votes have been stolen there. There are 71 million people who voted for Trump. And if those millions exercise their muscle, you don't have to go to the Antifa, Black Lives Matter thing of smashing everything up, because they won't tolerate that from 71 million Trump supporters. But 71 million people, that's powerful. And just millions of people acting in their own interest can make a difference like that. Mark Stein for Rush. We're going to take your call straight ahead. Mark Stein for Rush on America's #1 radio show. Let's go to Sandra in Bucks County, basically Fraudland Center in Pennsylvania. Let's go to Sandra in Bucks. I love that name. Rush used to have his list of favorite ladies' names, and Sandra should certainly be high up on that, even if I've given it a slightly longer vowel sound than I should. Sandra in Bucks County, what have you to report from Ground Zero in the great election heist?
Well, you got it. It is Sandra, and I want to wish Rush well this week. And I also want to thank him for having a brilliant, witty Mark Stein filling in. Thank you.
Well, I'm humbled by that. Thank you, Sandra.
And thank you. Here is a story. My husband and I were actually victims of election fraud, which required identity theft, forgery, co-opting of ballots, and actually voting. Now, it originally occurred in our primary. We're in our late 70s. We just moved here a couple of years ago. Someone was able to get and probably got into a database with all of the information that you have to have in order to apply for online ballots. So once you have done that, then you have to be able to have an exact copy of the signature, both written and printed. So all of this was done. Somebody co-opted, somebody got a hold of all of this information and was able to do this in the primary, and it was totally by accident that I got an email from the government on August 13th. I almost just swiped it out of my phone. I thought, I don't need this. But I did. I opened it and I read it, and it said that my ballot was pending, and I entered these permanent ballot status. And I said, I never did this. What is this all about? It's got to be a hoax.
Right.
I read it again, kept looking, and said, you know what? I think I'm going to start checking on this. I think it was a Thursday. I couldn't get through to anyone at the state for days because they put you in a loop, you know that. And eventually I did get to Bucks County, and they looked through and they said, oh, yeah, there's an application for you here. And by the way, there's a vote. I said, no, I didn't apply and I did not vote, period. So it took about 10 days to get all of this done. I filled out an application to cancel, took it in, reported it to the director in Bucks County. Didn't hear anything back. So I then called the local Republican representative. She got involved, interviewed us for a long period of time, and eventually it went to the solicitor. The solicitor took it to the U.S. Attorney's Office. We've never heard from the U.S. Attorney's Office. And that's very disturbing.
Yeah.
But we did hear from the local Bucks early on. This has been 2 months. Early on, and what they did was they took our DNA samples and our handwriting samples, and we told them it looks exactly like our handwriting.
Right.
Our handwriting samples in order to prove that we are not either crazy or, that we're lying or something. You can probably tell by speaking to me, although I'm 76 and so is my husband. We're very well educated, very intelligent, very fluent people, and somebody has done this to us, and if they did it to us, it's very possible. But I would like to just tell all of your viewers and anybody else who is listening, if you went to the polls and you were told that you had to do a provisional ballot, call, because that is exactly what would have happened to both of us had I not made the calls and done the due diligence. And Dean, my husband and I have done a lot of research on this, but we can't find the computer. We can't find the IP address on the computer that was used.
No, you shouldn't have to do that, though, Sandra. Here's the next thing you have to do, though. You have to contact, because, as you say, it doesn't happen with just one. This is basically the intentional theft of your vote. You have to call the office of Sidney Powell. She's one of the president's teams, or contact Kayleigh McEnany or whatever. You'll know how to contact the Trump campaign. It'll be out there. But try it with Sidney Powell. Try it with a lawyer. That basically your vote was stolen from you. And a lot of this stuff, like taking your DNA and all the rest of it, that's all nonsense. You're who you say you are, and someone who is not you has voted for you. And you need to take that and sign an affidavit. That's a fancy term, but basically what you have to do is type out what you've told me on a piece of paper and get it notarized by someone who's a justice of the peace. And they just have to notarize it. And then you have to just get hold of Sidney Powell or one of the president's other team and get it to them. There's too much of this. And it's not just anecdotal. But as Rush said yesterday, the evidence has to be sworn evidence if you're laying it before a court. So get an affidavit, do an affidavit, get it to the president's lawyer. Mark Stein for Rush. More straight ahead. Just to re-emphasize what I said to Sandra a couple of minutes ago, if you've got a story like this, if you know of a dead person who voted, if you're in that situation where you're a widow and your late husband voted, you've got to actually give a sworn declaration under penalty of perjury, find a justice of the peace, a notary to actually sign off on that and get it to one of the president's legal team, such as Sidney Powell, right now. Yes, America's Anchorman is away, and this is your EIB Anchor Baby. Honoured to be here. And we are going to have Todd Herman here tomorrow. You know, this is one of Rush's treatment weeks. You won't want to miss Todd. And then who knows? Rush might come roaring back, but if he doesn't, do forgive him. I can't tell you how much I admire Rush for what he's done. He worked so hard. He putting off. I mean, I don't know how committed you have to be to actually say, I'm going to postpone my treatment for a week, 2 weeks, so I can be here and get Donald J. Trump over the finish line. And in a free and fair election, he did that. Trump was winning on Tuesday night, and now we're in a very dark place. And I saw some guy on Twitter who said, you're basically saying all our efforts have been in vain. No, this is some guy with the Stop the Steal thing. No, I'm not saying that at all. But I'm saying that you've actually got to be focused for this period because December the Electoral College meets. And you know how it is. The left contain all the other levers of society, the show business and the mainstream churches and the education system and the Hollywood movies and the media and the big tech and all the rest of it. So it's actually very hard to bust through. You got to bust through with good stuff. Now, and that's actually on ordinary citizens as much as anybody else. It's on people like Sandra from Bucks County, whom we were just talking to. Sandra had her vote stolen. You know, the Democrats, and there's thousands of Sandras all over the country. But you've actually got to get this stuff to Sidney Powell and these other Trump campaign lawyers pretty damn sharpish and in a form that is acceptable to a court. So that would be a sworn declaration. It isn't difficult to do. There's all kinds of people. There's people in the UPS store who will notarize things for $5 or whatever it is. So you can get it notarized, you can get it sworn under penalty of perjury, and you can get it to Sidney Powell. But they need it quick, because the argument that's being made is that you're just whining, you're moaning. This thing, dead people have always voted. What's the big deal? It's not enough to make a difference. It's not enough to make the difference. Lindsey Graham is talking about ballot harvesting in Pennsylvania nursing homes, where 25,000 people from a few different nursing homes all mysteriously applied for mail-in ballots at the exact same time, and that in itself is suspicious. Here's the big thing, that if you actually look at the votes in these corrupt Democrat cities, where, as I said, a lot of the stuff they've been doing for 150 years. The 30 feet, you can't get within 30 feet of the guy counting the ballots. They were doing that in the late 19th century in Philadelphia, so they're not doing anything there that they haven't been doing for a long time. What's different is the distribution. They weren't able to steal votes narrowly, and one result of that is the vote distribution in these handful of cities that decided the election is actually different from that in the more or less normal places. So in the rest of America, we have blue states and we have red states and we have a couple of the saner swing states, such as New Hampshire. And then we have all these corrupt states, and Florida, to be fair, as well, because they cleaned up their act after 2000. And if you look at what's happened there, the distribution of the votes is given the relative numbers of Democrats and Republicans, is actually in proportion with a coherent national picture. Now, what you have then in somewhere like Philadelphia and somewhere like Michigan, you have boxes of votes coming in where, for a start, there's significantly higher turnout than anywhere. That turnout is reflected with and there's not just higher turnout, there's immensely distorted then turnout for the Democrats. So you have Biden in some precincts in Philadelphia winning by 100% of the vote. Some of the other places, they're not making it that obvious, but you've still got like an 80-20 Trump Biden-Trump split, which does not reflect the normal voting pattern. Then you've got this thing where they vote for Biden and nobody else. They don't vote for senator, they don't vote for representative, they don't vote for governor, they don't vote for state representative or anything like that. You've just got these votes for Biden. So there's an argument here, and it might. I said on the one hand, Trump's lawyer should just present a narrow argument. But if you wanted to make the big argument to the Supreme Court, and I'm not a judge's republic is a contradiction in terms, so, but if you wanted to make the big argument, you would actually start, assembling the evidence for saying that the cities that decided the election, the voting results do not reflect the pattern of blue states or red states or other swing states. They are simply too anomalous to be true. And you would then have to interest sufficient. I think you could interest Alito. I think you could interest Clarence Thomas. You'd have to interest 4 of them to get a hearing before the Supreme Court. But nevertheless, that's what a Supreme Court is for. If you're going to have a court, if you're going to go back to the Republic, if you're going to throw off a king to have 9 robed rulers instead, then this is actually what they're for, where you have something where the election rules are changed a couple of months before the election, and they have extraordinary results. But I'm not, this guy, and I would like to say this as politely as possible to this guy called Stop the Steal on Twitter. I take it Stop the Steal isn't your real name. And you know something? If we're going to turn this around, Stop the Steal is going to have to use his real name. People are going to have to man up. And just to go back to what Rush was talking about, the life, the fortune, the sacred honor. You can't talk about that if your Twitter handle is EaglePatriotMinuteman.com. You are actually going to, for this, 71 million people are going to have to stand up and say, I'm not Spartacus. I'm Mrs. Mabel Scroggins from Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and I'm saying that my vote was stolen. The Democrats have a sentimental argument here. Count every vote. Oh, count every vote. We believe in open borders, and we believe that everybody should be able, there's 7 billion people on the planet, and they should all have the right to come across the Rio Grande in a flat-bottom boat and vote in Philadelphia, because we want to hear from everyone. We're not racist. We want everybody to count every vote. Counting every vote is not a victimless crime. Every time you count the vote of an illegal alien, an illegal voter, a dead person, a kid, the donkey in your backyard, every time you count the vote of someone who should not be voting, you steal the vote of a legitimate voter. And that's an issue for these rock-ribbed originalists on the Supreme Court, because there is no point to a widespread corrupt election. No point whatsoever. And if you have Clarence Thomas, and if you have Sam Alito, and if you have Kavanaugh and Gorsuch and these other guys, and they're not interested in that, there's no point to a Supreme Court. You might as well all go home or clear off and go to small claims court till you retire. That gets to the heart of the integrity of the process as anything. Because if you don't have a clean vote, you don't have a citizen. The minute you have dead people, you don't have a citizen, because the dead are stealing the votes of citizens. The illegal voters are stealing the votes of citizens. The guy sitting in the back of the Biden-Harris truck, filling in all the ballots, is taking the votes of citizens. And what it requires is people with stories to tell, like Sandra, actually telling those stories, but in sworn declarations. And this is urgent. This is urgent now. You have to get it to the Trump campaign team, to the Trump lawyers, within basically 24, 48 hours, because they need sworn evidence. Because, as you know, the media now, the corrupt media, are saying, no, Neil Cavuto on Fox, Kayleigh McEnany. This is the difference a week makes. I followed Kayleigh McEnany on Fox and Friends, and no one was friendlier to Fox and Friends than Kayleigh McEnany, and they let her talk all she wants, and she's a friend of the show, and they're friends of hers, and back and forth, on, and they talked so long with Kayleigh, they only had 40 seconds left for me, or whatever it was. And then Kayleigh McEnany is on with Cavuto yesterday, Neil Cavuto, just after this show, and Neil Cavuto says he cannot, with a straight countenance, carry any more of this because Kayleigh's talking about systemic voter fraud and there's no evidence of that. So he cuts away from her because of his countenance. And that's how it's going to go. There's 71 million people. That's twice the population of Canada. That's 3 times the population of Australia. That's more than the population of the United Kingdom. 71 million people. And you need to stand up under your own names. And you can't go silent into the dark winter of Joe Biden. The Fox thing is interesting to me, where basically a third of the audience just is like, now we're done with you. That's the power of the voiceless. That's the power. They make money off you. They sell advertising based on you being there. The My Pillow guy isn't going to want to be there if Fox's audience tanks. So it's important for you to be there. That's all it is now. The deep state is corrupt. A lot of the courts are corrupt. A lot of the vote counters are corrupt. I mean, Pennsylvania is Belarus, basically. It's a cheesier version of Belarus. It's not as nakedly hostile as Belarus. Half these, you know what, I can't stand. What's the point? Just to go back to what Sherman was saying. Oh, well, Susan Collins won by 9 points. Oh, great. That's terrific news. So we get Susan Collins and we lose the presidency. That doesn't do it for me. This election is stolen. The vote dispersal in these decisive cities does not match that of red states, blue states, genuine swing states. It's a stolen, faked, fraudulent vote. There are a lot of very bad lawyers, but any competent person should be able to make that argument in a court of law. They need you. They need people like Sandra to sign affidavits and sworn declarations. Mark Stein in for Rush. We will take your calls straight ahead. Mark Stein on the EIB network. Hey, home security is no longer just for expensive waterfront property owned by campaign consultants. Rush makes the point that it's now for every home, and he gives Simply Safe a lot of the credit for that.
My friends, home security, no longer an expensive proposition. You don't need to spend thousands of dollars and sign a long-term agreement just to keep your family safe anymore. That's because a company came along and reinvented the way a home can be secured. It's called Simply Safe because they've made it simple to keep your family safe. Their home security system is built on Wi-Fi signals and cellular connections. That means, folks, it's a game changer. There aren't any wires. I cannot explain to you how important that is in terms of taking the complexity out of it, taking the cost out of it, making it a system that you can install happily and with fun, making it a system you can troubleshoot. Every door, every window, every room of your home protected. Simply Safe system includes all the sensors, all the detectors and cameras that you would need, and each of those components connected without a single wire, using Wi-Fi signals throughout your house. It makes it easier to install, easier to maintain, easier to understand how the system works, easier to troubleshoot. And if you want 24/7 monitoring, that's your option. $14.99 a month, not $50. It's simplysafeusa.com. That's the website where you go look at the system. You see the components. You pick the ones you want. You order them. They send them out to you pre-configured, pre-tested. And they'll throw in a free HD camera with your purchase. simplysafeusa.com.
Oh, sorry about that. I'd wandered off into reveries about this and that. The Mark Stein in for Rush Limbaugh. It's great to be with you. Let's go to Madeline in Elizabeth. That's the first mistake. I think that's the first time I've done that in 15 years. Everything's falling apart. Let's go to Madeline in Elizabethton, Tennessee. Great to have you with us, Madeline, or Madeline. How do you like it, Madeline?
You can call me whatever you like, sir.
Okay, I might get flirty and call you Maddie, but maybe I might hold off on that for a couple of minutes.
I've had that nickname since about 4th grade.
Really? Okay. Well, I'll try and come up with a better one. Anyway, it's great to have you with us, Madeline. What's on your mind today?
Thank you. I'm so happy to talk to you. Well, I thought I would call in this morning because I heard a lady from Kingsport just got to talk to you. And I'm 24 years old. I am a supporter of Trump. I voted for Trump. And I also didn't watch the election on election night. I didn't watch any of the news because I knew. I think we all knew that there was just going to be chaos. And I think my heart feels pretty good right now. Seeing the Senate testifying and Mr. McCabe going up there and getting grilled by my good old Mr. Cruz. I am very, very happy with what's going on right now, and I think that there is just faith over fear in this country. There is too much faith. The silent majority is not silent. I'm 24 years old, and I can see all this. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, you're inspiring, Madeline, and that is what we need today. The thing is, this thing can be reversed in four. You basically said that you knew there was going to be all this chaos. The minute.
Oh, come on. They prepared us for it. And I literally went to bed at 8 o'clock on election night. I woke up the next morning and I knew exactly what was going to happen. They were going to project a winner. They were going to call this winner that's not actually a winner because the media cannot decide. And that's what they've been saying all day. Oh, my goodness. We can't decide who the president is, obviously. Come on, sheep. Wake up in America. Listen to Trump. Who's in control? Who's in the White House until January, at least? My goodness.
That's great stuff, actually, there. We should sign you up and put you on the guest host roster, Maddie.
Oh, honey, you can call me anytime. I am sitting here, and I am a patriot. Faith over fear. We were praying for the president yesterday at 5 o'clock, and I thank every single patriot in this country that was praying for President Trump at 5 p.m. yesterday as they were going to the Supreme Court. I am so proud to be an American right now. There is no better place to be than here and right now because we are about to see history repeat and change itself because Trump sees. And Trump was in here to change it. He got in to change, and that's what he's doing.
That is brilliant, and that is stirring, and I thank you for that as we read the tea leaves of tedious litigation coming up in the next couple of weeks. It's good to have someone spell it out like that. Look, that's a 24-year-old Trump voter. And she gets it. This thing, people keep saying, Biden got to whatever it is now, 73, 74 million votes. That's an all-time record. That's more than Obama. Yeah, right. Trump got 71 million votes, and that's actually an accurate number. So, again, this is the point to bear in mind. Trump got more votes, honest votes. I don't know whether Biden got 2 million, 3 million, 4 million more votes than Trump. We know there are hundreds of thousands of votes he shouldn't have got. But we know that the 71 million votes for Trump are real. And you can't ignore that. You can't ignore that many people. And that many people, if they get together and they act on the integrity of that vote to protect the integrity of that vote, that's worth more than, some stupid investigation. The Durham report, all that's a waste of time. That's a crook racket that's already fixed. But Madeline in Elizabethtown, Pennsylvania, that is real. That is the voice of the people. That is Trump's army. and they're not going to take having this election stolen from them. Rush is out today. Todd Herman here tomorrow. Rush postponed this treatment week, and he loves to hear from you. You go to rushlimbaugh.com. It's easy to remember, rushlimbaugh.com. And you'll see there in big writing at the top of the page, The Rush Limbaugh Show. And above that, you'll see a menu bar, and you go 2 or 3 buttons along, and you click on Special Notes to Rush. You can leave a special note to Rush. And he gave his all and then some, going back to his wretched diagnosis at the beginning of the year and all the time he put in to get Trump across the finish line in November, and he did get him across the finish line. I believe Trump won the election. Trump won the election on Tuesday night, and then something that doesn't happen in real election systems. Everybody went home, and extra boxes were delivered at 3:30 in the morning, and then mysteriously all those boxes were for Biden. But Rush did his bit, and if you want to send him a special note, you just go to rushlimbaugh.com, menu bar, even above the top of the masthead where it says The Rush Limbaugh Show. Click on Special Notes to Rush and leave him a special message, because he has earned it. He has earned it. What's the 30,000 feet picture here? About a decade ago, populist parties started arising in Europe because people wanted more of a choice. In something like French and Austrian elections, you have a choice between a left-of-centre candidate and a very, 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 very slightly right of left-of-centre candidate. And they agree on all the issues. And in some places like Austria, the left-of-centre candidate and the very, 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 very slightly right of left-of-centre candidate wind up governing in a coalition anyway. All political choice had been eliminated from some of these systems. And people wanted a choice. And if the political system prevents respectable parties from raising certain subjects, like immigration, for example, then the people eventually will turn to unrespectable candidates. So they started voting for all these populist parties. And the populist parties started getting representation in Parliament, to the horror of the establishment, like Geert Wilders did in the Netherlands, or they became the principal opposition, like Marine Le Pen is in France, where if you look at a map of who votes for whom in last year's European election, you'll see that Monsieur Macron has a handful of high population French cities, and something like 80% of French territory is voting for Marine Le Pen. And then they started getting into power, like Viktor Orban in Hungary. And then the countries in which they were started creeping westward to countries that people pay slightly more attention to, like Austria and Italy. And so the European Union announced that it wasn't going to do business with the Austrian government because they were so deplorable. And the so-called president of Italy, not a title I recognize, but the so-called president of Italy took it upon himself to tell the populist coalition that he wouldn't accept their candidate for prime minister and they'd better come up with someone more respectable. And then it leapt the English Channel, and the British people voted for Brexit, which again wasn't supposed to happen, because every single political party, not just the Conservatives and the Socialists, but the Scottish Nationalists and the Sinn Féin Irish Revolutionaries, to their shame, because what's the point of throwing off the yoke of the evil British just to assume the yoke of Brussels and the European Union? They, despite the opposition of all those political parties, the people voted for Brexit. And then finally it jumped the ocean and people voted for Trump. And this time it was serious. And just as ever since the Brexit vote, you've had the entire establishment there basically trying to reverse Brexit, whether it's judges, whether it's the House of Lords, whether it is the BBC, all of them trying to crush Brexit, make it meaningless, reverse it. And they failed. And the establishment in the United States looked at this and they decided they weren't going to. You know, they've been trying to get rid of Orban in Hungary and it hasn't worked. They tried to reverse Brexit and didn't work. And what's the quickest way to shortcut all this? We don't care if Macedonia wants to vote for a populist. We don't care if Slovakia wants to vote for a populist. We don't care if Estonia wants to vote for a populist. But a populist isn't going to win in the United States of America. So it's important to reverse that and ensure and teach the people a lesson that it's never going to happen again. And so for 4 years, they tried with all this deep state stuff. Don't forget, we laugh at impeachment because they were such eunuchs, pathetic eunuchs. Nobody cares about what you say on a Ukrainian phone call. You know who's making phone calls to the Ukraine right now? Biden. He's phoning foreign leaders. That's why Jeff Sessions recused himself from the Russia investigation, because he had tea with the Russian ambassador. But that was then and this is now. So now Biden is, all the foreign leaders are calling, and suddenly that's not a thing anymore. Forget about the foreign leaders. Don't worry about the foreign leaders. And we forget. Look at the Mitt Romneys of this Republican Party. It came actually very close to being a serious thing. These things, the Russia probe, that was intended to kill Trump in the first 6 months of his term. Then you have things like impeachment. That was supposed to... They're not trivial things. They're ways to overturn the result of the 2016 election. And they were sophisticated. They involved MI6 in London and ASIO in Australia, ASIO in Australia, and Italian intelligence. Sophisticated operations involving the most powerful secret agencies on the planet. And they all failed. And then came the COVID and the mail-in ballots, and the Democrats said, you know, we've been overthinking this. Let's just do it old school. Let's just do it Tammany Hall style. Let's just do it the Philadelphia way and steal the election. And that is what they did. And I say that now because no one who has ever watched or observed an election, as one is not permitted to do in Pennsylvania, you know, you can observe an election in Ivory Coast, you can observe an election in Rwanda, but you can't observe an election in Pennsylvania or Michigan. And they decided simply to snaffle it away. And the idea is that now we're supposed, oh, never mind. It's like all these cozy, friendly, happy talk, keep talking, happy talk type stories you're now hearing. Oh, well, look at the wonderful result for Susan Collins. Doesn't that tell you that the Republican Party would just like to be a nice Susan Collins party and not have any of this unpleasant stuff about building wall? I'm never going back to that. What's the point of politics? I'd rather we just cut to the Civil War. If the choice is between a radicalized Democrat Party and a Susan Collins nominal opposition that just gets tugged by the ratchet effect of Democrat victories further and further and further toward insane territory that would be unrecognizable to the founding fathers of this republic. I'm not going back to that no choice. The choice increasingly that is between a serious leftist party and a party represented by Susan Collins or whoever that's unwilling to resist it. The American people went for Trump because they wanted a real choice. Because Jeb and Hillary, which is what it was supposed to be, is a mockery of a republic. What the hell is the point of that? Oh, we don't have titles of nobility. We don't have marquises and viscounts and dukes running around. Well, whoop-de-doo. Yeah, what's the point if the choice in an election is between the wife of a previous president and the brother and son of previous presidents? That was a joke. People want more choice, and Trump gave them that. And this is not a time to give up on him as Dan Quayle and all these other nothing figures are doing. Oh, give it up, it's over. You should be packing. They'll be coming for you any day now. No, he's got nothing to lose. He's got nothing to lose, and this is not a victimless crime. You know, the so-called progressives, with all their happy talk, oh, count every vote, count every vote. Their corruption is not victimless. You know, Hunter Biden stole from the Ukrainian people. He's getting $80,000 a month in a country where the average salary is like $200 a month. That's not a victimless crime. So they think, okay, well, we're stealing from the Ukrainian people. Let's just move that model to Philadelphia and Detroit and Milwaukee and steal from the American people, because that's what they did with Sandra in Bucks County. They stole her vote. This is not a victimless crime. It makes a mockery of equal protection, these 50,000 different types of voting system for the two national offices in this country. And that is something that you could easily make a serious, credible legal case to a Supreme Court that supposedly has 6 rock-ribbed originalists on it. And that's what we need to do. Don't give this up. Don't give this up. 71 million people are the subjects of the biggest electoral heist in the history of the Democratic era. This isn't like stealing an election in some upcountry province in Sudan. This is more than that. Mark Stein for Rush, your call straight ahead. Mark Stein in for Rush. Let us go to Jeff in Tampa. FLA, as I like to say. I don't really like 2-letter postal abbreviations anymore. With the mail-in ballots, I'm generally against the post office. So Tampa FLA, as we used to say in the old days. Jeff, you're on America's #1 radio show. What's on your mind today?
Well, I'm disappointed in you, sir.
Oh, my. Give it to me with both barrels.
Well, you're reporting the New York Times nonsense. Now, if the New York Times actually overheard our lawyers saying that they thought that they were wasting our money and they were happy about it, do you think the New York Times would tell us that? They'd sit on it. They would dance a jig if they had our lawyers not doing the job. They're trying to dispirit us. This is a disinformation deception plan.
No, that's true, but they actually did. I read that story very carefully. They've got quotations from Inside Jones Day, which means that they've found lawyers, attorneys in that law firm that have been willing to talk to the New York Times about their client. Now, in America, unlike, say, in England or Singapore, you don't contract with the lawyer, you contract with the law firm. That's one of the interesting differences between common law in America and the way it's done in common law systems overseas. And those guys gave quotations to the New York Times. And you're right about this. The reason they did that is to show that everyone is telling Trump, stick a fork in yourself, you're done, so go to hell, start packing, get out of here. And that's why he had to fire the defense secretary yesterday, and that's why Dan Quayle is talking today. But that's fine. No one's thought about Dan Quayle in 30 years. Who cares about him? But the Jones Day lawyers are actually screwing over their client by talking to the New York Times, and that's why I said Trump should fire them.
Well, then we lose all the work that's been done. And do we know that these guys are actually working on that case?
Yeah, they're going to lose the case. They're crap lawyers. As I said, America has as many lawyers as the rest of the planet put together, and that means it actually has more bad lawyers than the rest of the planet put together. Look, Trump has to have a lawyer he can trust. He can't go into court with a lawyer who's going to throw the case. These lawyers would be disbarred for talking to the New York Times has got actual quotey quote marks from people it's spoken to inside Jones Day, because they're trying to put pressure. This is basically like the same suppression campaign with the fake polls. They're trying to dishearten and demoralize Trump to persuade him to throw in the towel. And that's not what I'm doing. I'm saying, Trump, for God's sake, get rid of these duplicitous bastards backstabbing bozo bastards and get a lawyer who will fight for you. Get Sidney Powell. She's fought for Michael Flynn tooth and claw against a corrupt judge. And that lady is a fighter for her client. These Jones Day white shoe nincompoops are just people who take the money and then screw the case as they did with the Obamacare appeal. I'm sorry, Jeff, but basically, you can't go into court with a lawyer who doesn't believe in your case, and these guys have told the New York Times they don't. Thanks for your call. We're going to close it out in a moment. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. But we have laid it out for you over the last 3 hours. It is important to move with urgency. The charges are as serious as they've ever been, that an election was stolen in plain sight. Don't fall for this stuff. Oh, somehow CNN and ABC and even Fox News get to proclaim Biden the president-elect. That's just one of these stupid made-up titles. There's no such thing. There's nothing in the Constitution about the president. Oh, Mr. President-elect. Oh, yes, I am the president-elect. There's a sign behind me saying office of the president-elect. It means nothing. It's rubbish. He is not the duly elected president of the United States. There are 71 million Americans who voted for Donald Trump, and unlike the millions who voted for Joe Biden, Mr. Trump's voters are alive. They're not 118 or 120. My thanks to Mr. Snerdley and to Keith and to Mike. Don't miss the Colossus of the West Coast. Todd Herman will be here with the Rush Limbaugh Show tomorrow.
Welcome to today's edition of the Rush Limbaugh Show podcast.
Yes, America's anchorman is away. You know how this goes. Before we go any further, before we get into the nightmare we have been plunged into for the last week, I just want to say one thing about Rush.